Can you believe it? I blocked a Karen's golf cart, and she called the cops on me. But here's the kicker, she's the one who ended up getting in trouble. I'm Nolan, and honestly, it doesn't matter where you're watching this from, because this story, it's one for the books. It started with a simple desire for peace and quiet, and it ended with police warnings, petty revenge, neighborhood lies, and the freaking FBI. Buckle up. And if your HOA has ever pulled something shady, drop a comment. I read every reply here on QE Stories. Let me take you back. It all began when I moved into what was supposed to be a peaceful suburban neighborhood. You know the type, tree-lined streets, matching mailboxes, kids on bikes, retirees power walking with neon water bottles. The kind of place that practically screams quiet charm. That's all I wanted. After years of bouncing between apartments and shared spaces, all I really craved was stability and a little slice of calm. The house I found checked every box: clean layout, solid yard, and best of all, it was just a 2-minute walk to a beautifully maintained community pool. That pool sold me. I'm telling you, after spending my days wading through bureaucratic paperwork for building codes and zoning variances, the idea of relaxing by the water in the evenings sounded like actual paradise. I remember the realtor smiling just a little too tightly as I signed the paperwork. Her expression was pleasant enough, but something about it felt practiced. Like a rehearsed grin that had been used on dozens of buyers before me. I chalked it up to the usual sales pitch vibe. Looking back, I think that smile was code for run. But at the time, I was just relieved. Happy, even. I'd landed a place that felt right. I didn't realize I was stepping into a planned community that was less planned and more policed by a wannabe dictator. The first week in my new home was bliss. Pure, unadulterated bliss. I'd come home from work, crack open a cold beer, and make my way to the community pool, towels slung over my shoulder. Early evenings were usually empty, which was perfect. Just me, the chirp of cicadas, and the calming slap of water against the tiled edges. It was better than I imagined. For a few golden days, I honestly believed I'd found my sanctuary. There were maybe a dozen white plastic lounge chairs arranged around the pool, identical and a little weather-worn, but functional. I picked the one farthest from the entrance, tucked under the wide arms of an old oak tree. It offered just the right amount of shade, and the way the light filtered through the branches gave everything a soft, golden haze. It felt like my own little oasis. And then, I heard it. The sound that would mark the end of my peace. It started faint at first, like a whine in the distance. A golf cart. No big deal, right? A lot of residents in the community, mostly older folks, used golf carts to get around. But this one was different. The sound was louder than it had any right to be. The engine revved aggressively, like someone was deliberately flooring the pedal. You ever hear an engine sound angry? That's what it was. Like the damn thing was furious. I glanced up from my book, expecting to see a teenager goofing off. Instead, I saw something straight out of a comedy sketch, a bright pink golf cart, flame decals licking up the sides like it thought it was auditioning for Fast and Furious, Retirement Edition. And driving it? A woman I can only describe as the HOA's answer to a dethroned pageant queen. Her curls were unnaturally perfect, helmet stiff and likely the result of a weekly salon appointment. Her outfit was pastel, prim, and loud in that weird country club way. If Jackie O and a drill sergeant had a baby, it'd be her. She slammed the cart to a halt near the gate, kicked the parking brake with authority, and stepped out like she owned not just the pool, but the entire planet. Her eyes swept the area with the intensity of a battlefield commander. When they landed on me, the air seemed to chill by 10 degrees. "Excuse me," she called, her voice sharp, crisp, and laced with condescension. The kind of tone that makes you feel like you're about to be grounded, even if you're a grown adult with a mortgage. "Who said you could sit there?" I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "Sorry?" "That chair," she said, gesturing toward me like I'd committed a war crime. "Did someone tell you that was an available seat?" Now, mind you, there were maybe 3 other people at the pool. Plenty of empty chairs. No signs, no reserved towels, no save me flip-flops perched on the seat. Just me, sitting in the shade, reading a book. I looked around. "I didn't realize any chairs were assigned," I said cautiously. "Is this spot reserved?" She let out a humorless laugh. "I'm Prissy Peterson, HOA president," she said, like she was announcing royalty. "And as HOA president, I decide what's appropriate. That spot isn't." I had to take a beat to process what she just said. She decides what's appropriate? At a public community pool? I pay HOA fees just like everyone else. Did that not entitle me to equal use of the amenities? I didn't mean any disrespect, I said calmly, trying not to escalate. I just picked the chair with the most shade. Her expression tightened. Fees don't give you privileges, honey. She actually called me honey. Not the nice kind, either. The belittling kind, the one that says, you clearly don't understand how things work around here. I felt a spark of irritation flicker in my chest, but I held it in. I was new here. Maybe she was just one of those overzealous people who mellowed out once they got to know you. Then she pulled out her phone. Right in front of me. Harvey, she said into the receiver, pacing now like she was planning troop movement. There's a stranger in the VIP section at the pool. No, I don't care if it's public. I make the rules here. VIP section? I looked around again. Same white plastic chairs. Same cracked concrete. Was she serious? Was there an invisible velvet rope I missed? I didn't say anything. I was too stunned. Watching her pace like some HOA Napoleon in yoga pants, I had no idea what to even say. That's when salvation arrived in the form of an older gentleman sitting a few chairs down. He looked to be in his 70s, tanned, with a weathered face and a paperback resting on his lap. He stood and shuffled over, casting a glance at Prissy, who was now rearranging pool noodles like they were evidence in a crime scene. "You're new here?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. He gave a tight-lipped smile. "Word of advice, avoid her. Last year she got her family kicked out over improper mailbox color." I blinked. "What does that even mean?" "Exactly," he said. "Nobody knew. But somehow, she made it happen." He walked off before I could ask more. But the chill remained. She got people kicked out? Over mailbox colors? I looked back at her. She stood now with her arms crossed, smug as a cat in cream, clearly proud of her little power play. And all I could think was, what kind of person uses power like this? What kind of life must you have to get joy out of policing neighbors like a third-grade hall monitor? I wanted to believe this was just a one-time thing. That if I avoided her, stayed quiet, and kept to myself, everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew. This was just the beginning. And damn. I wasn't wrong. Maybe she just had a bad day. That's what I told myself the next evening, sitting in the exact same chair by the pool, at the exact same time. The same shady spot beneath the oak tree, book in hand, trying to pretend the previous day hadn't happened. Maybe she'd gotten some bad news. Maybe her doctor gave her a stern talk about cholesterol. Maybe her poodle ran away. Or maybe, and this was my most generous theory, she was under a lot of stress and had taken it out on the new guy. People snap. It happens. That didn't make it okay, but I wanted to believe it wasn't personal. Because the truth is, I wasn't looking for a fight. I didn't move into this community to go toe-to-toe with a turf-obsessed HOA president. I came here for peace. After years of dealing with the chaos of downtown living, barking dogs, broken elevators, mystery smells in the hallway, I thought I'd finally found a quiet corner of the world where I could unwind. And I wasn't going to let one bad encounter ruin that. So, I went back. I figured if I acted normal, maybe she would too. And for a while, it worked. About 20 blissful minutes of uninterrupted peace. I even started to convince myself I'd overreacted yesterday. That maybe the older neighbor who warned me about her was exaggerating. Maybe Prissy Peterson wasn't some tyrannical despot in capri pants. Maybe she just had a flair for dramatics. I could live with that. But then, the sound. The familiar whir of an electric motor, whining louder than necessary, revving in a way that felt oddly aggressive for a golf cart. I didn't even have to look up. I knew. That sound had already been burned into my subconscious. She was back. And this time, she wasn't just arriving, she was making an entrance. The pink golf cart rounded the corner like it was drifting into a NASCAR pit stop. I swear to you, it screeched. I know golf carts aren't supposed to screech, but somehow this one did. Maybe it was the decals, flames shooting down the sides in what had to be a cry for attention. Maybe it was the ancient battery coughing up its last volt. Or maybe it was just her energy. That woman could make a whisper sound like a war drum. She pulled right up to the pool gate and parked her cart. Directly. In. Front. Of. The. Exit. Not a partial obstruction. Not sort of in the way. She parked perpendicular across the gate like a blockade. Like she was enforcing a lockdown at a nuclear facility. I blinked. Was this really happening? The bass from her country music playlist shook the concrete. It was loud enough to rattle the pool skimmer. Whatever she was playing sounded like someone had weaponized twang. The lyrics were lost in the reverb, but the message was clear. She was here, she was loud, and she wanted a scene. She didn't get out of the cart. She just sat there, staring at me, arms crossed, a smug little smile on her face like she just won an Oscar for Best Villain in a suburban drama. Clearly, she was waiting for me to do something. React. Flinch. Acknowledge her presence. But I didn't. Not at first. I sat there in silence, watching her through my sunglasses. A small part of me wondered if this was a prank. Like maybe someone would jump out with a camera and yell, "You've been punked." But no. This wasn't a joke. She was dead serious. She had deliberately parked her little chariot of doom to block the only entrance and exit to the pool. In broad daylight. With music blaring. In full view of anyone walking by. It was so absurd, I almost laughed. Almost. But laughter turned to disbelief when I realized she was completely serious. This was her move. Her power play. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want compromise. She wanted control, or chaos. Or maybe both. I took a breath. I wasn't in the mood for drama. But walking away would feel like surrendering. And I hadn't done anything wrong. So I stood up, calmly, and walked over to her cart. I didn't touch it. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood directly in front of it, arms crossed, staring back. She yanked off her sunglasses like a gunslinger throwing down the gauntlet. "Move," she barked over the music. "You're blocking my cart." The irony was so thick you could frost a cake with it. She was blocking a community exit, an emergency exit, no less, but I was the problem because I stood near her vehicle. "I'll move when you move your cart from the exit," I said, voice flat, tone controlled. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I just wanted her to see the absurdity of what she was doing. She didn't. "How dare you," she screamed, voice rising. "I'm the HOA president." Like that title gave her diplomatic immunity. And that's when she pulled out her phone. She started dialing furiously, eyes darting between me and her keypad like she was defusing a bomb. At first, I assumed she was calling community security. Or Harvey, her mysterious right-hand man. I was wrong. So wrong. She called 911. "Help," she shrieked into the phone. "I'm being attacked. There's a man here, threatening me. He's blocking my cart. I'm scared. I'm scared for my life." I stood there, jaw slack. Attacked? I hadn't moved. I was standing 3 feet away, hands at my sides, not even brushing the golf cart. She was performing like I had a chainsaw and a vendetta. Theatrics worthy of an off-Broadway meltdown. It would have been hilarious, if it wasn't so terrifying. This woman had just lied to emergency services. And I had no idea how this was going to play out. So I did the only smart thing left. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I filmed everything. A wide shot of the scene. Her golf cart blocking the exit. Her sitting comfortably in her seat, phone pressed to her ear, yelling about threats and danger while I stood in full view of the camera, visibly calm and unmoving. "He's attacking me," she shouted, pointing at me for the imaginary audience. "He's threatening me." "I'm standing 3 feet away," I said into the camera, deliberately calm. "I am not touching anyone or anything." Several neighbors had begun to gather nearby. I saw a few whispering, watching from the shade like spectators at a tennis match. Some looked confused. Others, amused. But no one came closer. I didn't blame them. This had gone from weird to unhinged in 10 minutes. The wait for the cops felt endless. Prissy alternated between shouting at me to get away from her property and telling 911 that I was escalating things, even as I stood there like a mildly annoyed lamppost. She claimed she feared for her life, that I was hostile, that she was being held against her will. Held. By a man standing 3 feet away in flip-flops and a Target t-shirt. When Officer Miller finally arrived, I breathed an internal sigh of relief. Middle-aged, calm, with the kind of weary expression that said he'd seen it all, probably twice. He stepped out of the squad car, took one look at the scene, and sighed. Prissy rushed him like a damsel in distress. "Officer. He trapped me. He blocked my cart. He wouldn't let me leave." He gave her a polite nod and let her ramble for about 60 seconds before turning to me. "Sir, what's your version of events?" "Actually," I said, holding out my phone, "I recorded the whole thing. It's all here. No editing. Full context." He took the phone and watched silently. And that's when the magic happened. His face shifted. Mild curiosity turned to frowning disbelief. He rewound, watched it again, this time paying closer attention. When he finally handed me the phone back, his jaw was set. He said, turning back to Prissy, "This video clearly shows Mr. Grant standing calmly. You parked your golf cart across the pool exit and refused to move. He did not touch you, threaten you, or obstruct your ability to leave. You filed a false report." But he was intimidating me," she cried, suddenly less sure of herself. "He wouldn't let me go." "You were free to move your cart at any time," Officer Miller said. "Instead, you chose to block a public exit and fabricate a police emergency. This is your official warning. Do not make false claims again." Her face went pale. Then red. Then something in between, like a beat going through puberty. She sputtered something unintelligible, but it didn't matter. She'd lost. For now. But as Officer Miller packed up and left, I caught the look in her eye. That tight-lipped fury. That vow of vengeance. The battle wasn't over. I thought maybe, just maybe, that the public embarrassment and police warning would be enough. That she'd back off. But I'd underestimated just how deep her need for control went. The following Monday, I came home from work and froze. There, taped to my front door, not placed in the mailbox, not mailed like a normal notice, but taped, was a letter with the official Sunset Meadows HOA logo on the top corner. My heart sank. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside, 5 separate violation notices. 5. Noise complaint. Improper trash bin placement. Unauthorized vehicle in driveway. Decorative lighting not HOA approved. And, you guessed it, obstruction of common property pathways. It wasn't about rules. This was war. And Prissy Peterson had just made her next move. It started on an otherwise ordinary Saturday evening. I was inside my house, lounging on the couch with a bowl of popcorn, half watching a true crime documentary on Netflix. The volume was at a perfectly normal level, not even close to anything that could be considered loud. The most noise I'd made all day, as far as I could remember, was the soft click of my front door shutting when I went out to grab the mail. That was it. So when I found a bright orange notice slapped onto my front door the next morning, with the all-caps heading "Notice of Violation," I blinked at it in confusion. Violation number 1, according to the paper, was for disturbance of community peace due to excessive noise. I stood there in my pajamas, barefoot on my porch, rereading it in disbelief. Noise? From what? The muted TV? The mailbox creaking open? It felt like a joke. It didn't end there. The notice listed 5 violations in total. Violation number 2 was for improper parking in designated areas. That one almost made me laugh out loud. My car was exactly where it had been every single night since I moved in, inside my garage. Where, exactly, was I supposed to park it? On the roof? On stilts? Maybe levitating above the driveway to preserve the sanctity of the HOA's sightlines? Violation number 3 was a real head-scratcher, unauthorized landscaping modifications. I hadn't changed a thing in the yard since I bought the place. The same shrubs, the same sun-wilted patches of grass, the same row of geraniums that the last owners planted. Unless watering the plants suddenly counted as modification, I had no clue what that charge even meant. And then came violation number 4, the one that made my blood pressure spike. Pool area misconduct and disruption of community order. That one referred to an incident from earlier in the week, when Priscilla, the HOA board president and neighborhood tyrant, called 911 because I didn't exit the pool area fast enough after she claimed it was closing. She had physically blocked the gate and demanded I leave, even though it was 6:45 and the posted hours clearly said the pool closed at 8 o'clock. But apparently, I was the one who disrupted peace. Violation number 5 was the cherry on the passive-aggressive sundae, disrespect toward HOA authority and failure to adhere to community standards. That one was so vague I actually read it 3 times trying to understand what it meant. It sounded more like a teenager scolding a classmate than an actual legal citation. Disrespect. What did that even mean in this context? Did I not curtsy when Prissy walked by? Each so-called violation came with a fine. $50 for the noise complaint, $7 to $5 for the parking, $100 for the landscaping, $150 for the pool incident, and $200 for the disrespect nonsense. A total of $575. Over half a grand, and for what? Watching Netflix? Parking in my own garage? Watering my plants? I wasn't just irritated, I was confused. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I'd made a point to read the HOA handbook cover to cover. I remembered the usual stuff. No giant lawn flamingos, no repainting your house neon green, don't leave trash cans out for 3 days straight. But nothing I had done even remotely matched what the violations were accusing me of. Just to be sure, I went inside and pulled the binder out of my filing cabinet. The HOA guidelines were dry, dull, and written in the kind of bureaucratic language that made your brain melt, but after flipping through for an hour, I confirmed my suspicion. These infractions were either made up or so broadly worded they could be used to justify anything. That's when I decided to call Matt. Matt had been my college roommate back in the day. He went on to become a property attorney, while I went into IT. We kept in touch, the kind of casual friendship that didn't need constant maintenance. I trusted him to give it to me straight. If this was just some misunderstanding, he'd tell me. If I was being railroaded, he'd say that too. He picked up on the second ring. "Yo, Nolan. What's up?" "I need your eyes on something," I said, already snapping photos of the violations. "I just got slapped with 5 HOA infractions. Most of them don't even make sense." I explained everything: the mail retrieval, the pool standoff, the mystery landscaping charge, the parking joke. There was a long pause on the other end. "Nolan," Matt said finally, voice low. "This is ridiculous. You can't get fined for disrespect. That's not a legal term, it's subjective nonsense. And the pool incident? If she blocked the exit, she created a safety issue, not you." I felt a wave of relief, followed quickly by unease. What if she's done this before? I asked. What if she's targeting people who push back? There was another pause. Then Matt said something that made the hair on my neck stand up. "I'm going to look into her. Something smells off here. Nobody writes 5 violations in a day unless they're either totally unhinged or covering something up." That phrase, covering something up, lingered in my mind for the next 2 days. Then Matt called back. "Dude," he said, voice low with disbelief, "I found something. Remember the pool incident?" "Yeah? Well, in this month's HOA financial report, public record, by the way, there's a $500 line item for emergency legal consultation. Same day as the 911 call." Wait, are you telling me she used HOA money to hire a lawyer after she called the cops on me?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Matt replied. "She panicked after getting warned for a false report and dipped into community funds to cover her own ass. And now she's fining you to help pay that bill." I laughed. Then stopped. It wasn't funny. It was appalling. This wasn't just petty neighbor drama. This was corruption. Someone abusing their authority to shield themselves from consequences, and weaponizing community resources to do it. Fueled by a mix of anger and disbelief, I dug deeper. I filed a formal request for the last year's worth of financial statements. As a homeowner, I had every right to know where my dues were going. The deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. Every few months, like clockwork, there were legal expenses labeled consulting or emergency review. And those months just so happened to align with incidents involving resident complaints, usually directed at Prissy. It didn't take a forensic accountant to see the connection. I wasn't dealing with someone petty, I was dealing with someone dangerous. 3 days later, I found another notice taped to my door. It wasn't a violation this time. It was worse. Emergency HOA meeting, community safety review. It was scheduled for Thursday night. The subject? Aggressive resident behavior toward HOA board members. I didn't need a crystal ball to know exactly who they were talking about. They were planning to publicly shame me, using the money I paid them. I called Matt. "They're going to turn this into a show trial," I said. "What do I do?" Matt was quiet for a moment, then replied, "You show up. You bring everything, the violation notices, the police report, the financial documents. Stay calm. Stick to the facts. Let her overplay her hand." Overplay her hand. People like her always do. They think they're invincible, until they go too far. Thursday evening, I dressed in a button-down shirt and jeans, packed a folder with every shred of evidence I had, and parked 2 blocks away from the community center. The parking lot was jammed, the most packed I'd ever seen it. Inside, the air buzzed with low conversations and curious looks. At least 20 people had shown up, a record turnout for what was normally a 5-person snooze fest. Word had clearly spread. And there she was, Prissy, seated at the front like a senator, complete with a tiny American flag pin on her lapel and a stack of papers she dramatically fanned through like they held nuclear codes. She called the meeting to order with a gavel she probably bought on Etsy and a voice full of self-importance. Theatrics. That's all it was. But I had truth on my side. And if Matt was right, she was about to dig her own grave. The room fell so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the ceiling fan as it rotated lazily above us. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glare over the folding tables arranged in rows. Chairs creaked as people shifted uneasily, casting glances between each other, then at her, Prissy Peterson, who stood at the front of the community center, holding court like a dictator addressing her regime. "We're here tonight because of a serious safety concern that threatens the well-being of our entire community," she said, her tone authoritative and laced with fake concern. Then she looked straight at me, the corners of her mouth tightening in triumph. "Mr. Grant has exhibited aggressive behavior, threatened board members, and disrupted the peaceful environment that we've all worked so hard to maintain. Tonight, we need to decide what action is necessary to protect our families and our property values." It took every ounce of control not to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. I gripped the sides of my chair, fingers digging into the cheap plastic just to stay grounded. I wanted to shout, "Are you serious?" I wanted to roll my eyes so hard they'd never come back around. But another part of me, the rational part, wondered, what if they actually believed her? I was the new guy, after all. They knew her. She'd been HOA president for over a decade. All she had to do was spin the right story, paint me as the dangerous outsider, and they'd probably nod along. She finished her speech with a fake smile, one of those too wide expressions that doesn't even try to hide the venom behind it. "Mr. Grant, would you like to respond to these allegations?" Would I? Oh, I had been waiting for this. I stood slowly, deliberately. "Yes, I would," I said. Then I pulled out my phone, walked over to the podium, and connected it to the projector. I think everyone here deserves to see what really happened at the pool that day. The moment the video began to play, the mood in the room shifted like a sudden drop in air pressure before a storm. Every head turned toward the screen. In crystal clear audio, you could hear Prissy screaming, demanding I vacate her chair, calling me a trespasser, blocking the pool's emergency exit, and finally, making a 911 call while I stood calmly several feet away. At one point, someone in the front row gasped. A man behind me muttered, "Oh my God," under his breath. When it ended, I waited a beat, letting the silence settle. Then I projected the police report. Officer Miller's official statement confirms that Mrs. Peterson received a formal warning for filing a false police report. No charges were filed against me because, quite simply, I didn't do anything wrong. Some people looked stunned. Others exchanged knowing glances, like maybe this was just the tip of a larger iceberg. But I wasn't done. Next, I opened the HOA expense records for the month following the pool incident. "Now here's something interesting," I continued, highlighting a single line item with a laser pointer. A $500 payment labeled Emergency Legal Consultation, Peterson Legal Services. That's your HOA fees, your money, being used to pay for her personal legal issues related to that false police report. It was like someone lit a match in a fireworks factory. "She used our money for that," a woman near the back shouted. "Is that even legal?" another voice called out. People began talking over one another, voices rising, faces flushed with anger. Prissy stood frozen at the front, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide. She had clearly miscalculated. She probably assumed I'd be too embarrassed or outmatched to fight back. But some of us read more than Facebook rants, we read financial statements. I stepped away from the podium and let the chaos unfold. Neighbors began to share their own experiences. "She fined us $200 because our mailbox was too matte," one man said, still clutching his copy of the meeting agenda. "She wrote me up for taking out the trash 10 minutes early," someone else added. "She told me my roses violated the color code," said an elderly woman near the front. Who has a rose color code? It was surreal. Like a dam had burst and everyone was finally saying out loud what they'd been whispering for years. Prissy tried to regain control, stepping forward with that same voice she always used, the one that made you feel like you were back in grade school. "These were all legitimate community expenses," she barked. "Mr. Grant is manipulating the facts. You're all being turned against your elected leadership." A moment passed. Then someone stood up. "Prissy, when was the last time we actually had an HOA election? Because I sure don't remember voting for anyone in years." Boom. That was it. The final nail in the perfectly polished coffin. There was a brief attempt at rebuttal, some mention of appointed positions and emergency meetings, but it was drowned out by calls for a vote. The vote to remove her from office was 18 in favor, 2 against. Those 2 likely feared retaliation. As the votes were counted, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. This wasn't the end of a game, it was the end of a reign. Pris's face said it all. The smugness had drained away, replaced by disbelief, then pure, quiet rage. She looked around like a queen realizing the villagers had finally brought torches. "You people have no idea what you're doing," she hissed. "This community needs strong leadership, and you're about to find out what happens when you don't have it. This isn't over." Her voice shook, not from sadness, but fury. And that final line, it sent a chill down my spine. I'd won the battle, sure. But something told me the war was far from over. At first, it started small. My morning newspaper began disappearing. At first, I figured maybe the delivery guy was just being lazy. But then came the trash, small, deliberate messes strewn across my lawn. Then spray paint. Someone scrawled "troublemaker" across my windshield. The smell of cheap aerosol still lingered in the air when I walked out the door. Another day, a full bag of dog waste dumped on my porch. Real mature stuff. Still, I might have brushed it off as random vandalism, until I found an old HOA campaign flyer, waterlogged and stuck to my fence, with Pris's slogan still visible, "Keeping order, one home at a time." Subtle as a brick through a window. She was unraveling. And she was getting sloppy. Lucky for me, I knew how to dig. Years in building regulation had taught me how to read between the lines, how to spot discrepancies, navigate property databases, and track ownership history. I started looking through HOA land use records, mostly out of curiosity, but also because something felt off. Call it instinct. One evening, while flipping through a stack of old meeting minutes and parcel maps, I found it. A land transfer dated 6 months earlier. Community green space, our park, had been sold. Not leased. Sold. To a company called Peterson Properties LLC. That was the same park kids played in. The one where neighbors grilled hot dogs on weekends, and toddlers hunted for Easter eggs every spring. That was ours. Everyone thought it was protected land. Turns out, it wasn't. I looked into Peterson Properties LLC. The rabbit hole got dark fast. The company was registered in another state. No website. No phone number. Its listed address was a P.O. box in Nevada. Owner's name? Derek Peterson. Peterson, as in Prissy Peterson. The sale price? $300,000. How had she pulled that off? According to our HOA bylaws she helped write, no sale of community property could take place without a full community vote. And yet, there was no record of any such vote. No announcement. No meeting. Nothing. The signature on the approval line? Prissy Peterson. I stared at the document, heart pounding. This wasn't just unethical. This was criminal. And suddenly, all the pieces started to fall into place. The desperate retaliation, the deflection, the smear campaign, it wasn't just about ego. It was about hiding something bigger. Something serious. She hadn't just lost her title. She'd lost control of the cover-up. And I had the paper trail to prove it. Now the question wasn't if I could stop her. It was whether I could do it before she took the whole neighborhood down with her. I called Matt again, my go-to for anything involving legal gray areas, and this definitely wasn't just gray anymore, it was pitch black. "Matt," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I think Prissy has been running some kind of real estate scam. Not just HOA-level stuff. I mean, big. Possibly criminal." I told him everything I'd found so far, the weird property sale, the name Peterson Properties, the odd permit sign near the park. There was a long, heavy silence on the line. I imagined him adjusting his glasses and rubbing his temple, the way he did when someone mentioned tax codes. "Nolan," he finally said, his tone sharp and alert, "if what you're telling me is accurate, we're not talking about HOA mismanagement or misuse of funds anymore. This is potentially felony-level fraud. Real estate fraud. Wire fraud. Depending on how the money moved, maybe even federal crimes." That took the wind out of me. What do I do? "Nothing," Matt said quickly. "Not yet. Don't confront her, don't accuse her of anything, not even in passing. If this woman really is pulling a scam this elaborate, then you cornering her might make her dangerous. Let me dig into Peterson Properties. Give me a few days." While Matt was off doing his lawyer thing, digging through databases, making quiet calls, I decided to pay another visit to the section of the park that had supposedly been sold. The first time I'd walked by there, I thought nothing of it. But now I was seeing it through an entirely different lens. What I saw confirmed every fear I'd been trying to suppress. Bright orange construction markers now bordered the playground and picnic area, the very heart of our shared community space. A laminated sign had been staked into the dirt by the sidewalk, a city planning notice announcing a pending permit application. The applicant? Peterson Properties LLC. The intended development? A commercial coffee shop. My stomach dropped. A coffee shop. On our land. On community land. Suddenly, it all clicked. The fines, the hostile HOA meetings, the rushed vote no one paid attention to, the obscure agenda item in the quarterly newsletter that nobody read. Prissy had been setting this up for a long time. She wasn't just embezzling HOA funds, she was trying to convert our public space into private profit. And she was using our money to do it. The full shape of her scheme came into view, dark and elegant in the way only truly sinister plans can be. She'd created a fake company, Peterson Properties, under the name of a relative, someone distant enough not to raise suspicion but close enough to be trusted. Using her position as HOA president, she funneled money from the HOA's emergency reserve fund, money we all paid in, into the sale of a portion of our own land. The transaction appeared legitimate on paper, but it was a farce. The buyer and the seller were essentially the same person. And the land that was supposed to be held in trust for the community had been flipped for private use. Her endgame was chillingly simple: build a coffee shop, rake in the profits through her dummy company, and leave the community footing the bill to maintain the surrounding infrastructure. We'd be paying for sidewalks and landscaping around a business we didn't even want. Meanwhile, the kids would lose their playground, the families would lose the picnic tables, and we'd all be drinking overpriced lattes brewed from betrayal. I felt physically ill. 3 days later, Matt called me back. "Nolan," he said, his voice low and urgent, "this is way bigger than we thought." He traced Peterson Properties to Pris's nephew, Derek Peterson, a 20-something who lived 3 states away and had no history of actual business dealings. "The company's a shell," Matt explained. "It exists on paper but doesn't conduct any real operations. It was created for one purpose: to serve as the buyer in this fake land deal. And the $300,000 that supposedly came from the company to purchase the land? It was actually taken from our HOA's emergency reserve fund." I was speechless. "She literally used our own money to buy our own property from ourselves," Matt continued. "Then planned to turn it into a business that would profit only her and her relatives. That's embezzlement. And because the money was funneled through multiple bank accounts and crossed state lines, it qualifies as wire fraud. That makes it a federal crime. The FBI is going to be very interested in this." He said that last part like a warning. 2 weeks later, I found out just how interested they were. It was a Thursday morning, and I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, working from my home office, when I heard a sudden flurry of noise outside. At first, I thought it was just a landscaping crew or delivery trucks. But when I looked out my window, I saw 3 black SUVs parked directly in front of Pris's house. Men and women in windbreakers with FBI stamped across their backs were carrying boxes and folders out the front door. Prissy stood on the front lawn in her bathrobe, hair a mess, eyes wide and unblinking. She looked like someone had dropped her into a nightmare and hadn't yet told her it was real. In a way, it was poetic justice. A single 911 call over a pool chair had led to the unraveling of a carefully orchestrated scam, years in the making. She had tried to bully me, humiliate me, arrest me, for standing near her golf cart. And now she was being investigated by the FBI for multiple federal offenses. It felt surreal. Matt kept me updated as the case progressed. Once the FBI got involved, everything accelerated. Agents conducted interviews, subpoenaed records, obtained warrants. Within 6 weeks of the raid, formal charges were filed: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and falsifying official documents. It was a cascade of legal language, each charge heavier than the last. When Matt called to tell me I'd be needed to testify, I felt my stomach twist. "Just be honest," he said. "Tell the court how it started. What you saw. The paper trail speaks for itself, but your perspective helps make it human." I dusted off my best suit, unsure if it even fit right anymore, and steeled myself for what would come next. I hadn't seen Prissy since the raid. Part of me expected her to still carry herself like royalty, the imperious HOA queen who ruled with a gavel in one hand and a petty grudge in the other. But when I walked into the courtroom, the woman I saw sitting at the defendant's table barely resembled her. Gone were the designer tennis skirts and high-end sunglasses. She wore a modest, wrinkled black dress that looked like it had been pulled from the clearance rack of a department store. Her face was pale, and her once confident posture had collapsed inward. The charges were read aloud by the prosecutor, each one a dagger to her credibility and ego. filing a false police report, embezzling HOA funds, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud. One by one, each accusation was laid bare for the court to hear. The potential penalties were staggering, decades in prison if the maximum sentences were imposed. I felt a flash of sympathy. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because it was all so unnecessary. If she'd just treated people with respect, played fair, followed the rules, none of this would have happened. But she couldn't help herself. When I took the stand, I stuck to the truth. I explained how the pool dispute had escalated. How I'd looked into the fines she was levying and found inconsistencies. How that curiosity turned into a deep dive into financial records, board minutes, and permit applications. I told them about the fake company, the shell transactions, and how the land that belonged to all of us had nearly been stolen in broad daylight. The prosecutor presented the hard evidence next: bank statements, transaction records, documents filed under false names, city permit forms, and internal HOA memos. The web of lies was undeniable. Pris's lawyer tried to claim she was a confused elderly woman who'd been misled by family members. But you don't accidentally create shell corporations and reroute six figures across state lines. The judge wasn't buying it either. When the sentence came down, I held my breath. Restitution, $450,000, every stolen penny plus interest and penalties. Probation, 2 years of strict financial oversight. Community service, 200 hours. Permanent ban, barred from ever holding an HOA leadership role again, anywhere in the country. And perhaps best of all, every financial account she owned would be under court supervision until she repaid the last cent. It wasn't prison. But it was justice. And this time, no amount of spray paint or HOA notices would change that. Underscore 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 underscore. There was something strangely poetic about seeing Prissy Peterson's beloved pink golf cart, her unofficial throne on wheels, sitting abandoned behind a rusted chain-link fence at the county auction yard. Its once vibrant flame decals had begun to peel from the sides, the glossy finish dulled by sun and neglect. The obnoxious Pool Queen bumper sticker, once slapped on like a badge of honor, now clung on crooked and faded, the word Queen partially scratched away. It wasn't just a vehicle. For years, it had been her scepter, her way of arriving with flair and announcing control. And now it waited in silence, a sad relic of a toppled regime. Sold off with the rest of her assets to help repay the very neighbors she'd wronged. I didn't plan to drive by the auction yard that day, but when I saw the cart tucked in the corner behind a busted riding mower and a stack of weathered patio furniture, I couldn't look away. It looked small now. Powerless. Stripped of all the menace it once held simply because the woman who used it to terrorize her community had finally been exposed. Her empire, her false sense of dominion, all dismantled in broad daylight. And somehow, seeing that cart in such a pitiful state made it all real. After months of tension, legal battles, community meetings, and quiet resistance, this symbol of her tyranny had become nothing more than another item tagged for bidding. When the day of her sentencing came, I didn't expect a show. But of course, Prissy couldn't let her exit be quiet. As we left the courthouse that afternoon, sun flaring off the windows and murmurs still floating in the hallway behind us, she turned to me. Her gaze hadn't lost that edge, still sharp, still dripping with resentment, but the posture was different. No puffed chest. No smug superiority. Just bitterness. "This is all your fault," she muttered, more tired than furious. No screaming. Just that cold, cutting tone she used so well. For a second, I considered walking away without saying anything. Let her stew in it. But something in me couldn't let her have the last word. So I looked her square in the eye and replied, calm and clear, "No, this is all yours. I just refuse to let you get away with it." And in that moment, I knew it was done. Not just legally, but emotionally. The war was over. The weeks that followed were like a second spring for our neighborhood. People were cautious at first, like stepping out into the light after being locked in a storm cellar. After so many years under Pris's thumb, trust didn't come easy. But change, once it began, spread faster than fear ever had. The new HOA board, elected in an emergency meeting just 2 weeks after Pris's arrest, wasted no time in flipping the script. Their very first order of business was an open apology. At their first public meeting, the new president, a soft-spoken woman, Named Mrs. Gupta, who had previously stayed far from HOA politics, stood up in front of dozens of residents and said, "We're sorry. You deserved better leadership. And going forward, you will have it." They followed that up by instituting a new policy. All HOA financial records would be audited by a third-party firm and released quarterly to every resident. No more secrets. No more hidden accounts. No more misuse of power disguised as neighborhood upkeep. But it wasn't just policy changes. It was the energy. You could feel it. People started talking to each other again. Real conversations, not just whispered complaints or nervous greetings. That same neighbor who'd once stood by Pris's side during her infamous emergency meetings, the one who had called me disruptive for questioning pool chair placement, walked up to me during the community barbecue a month later. "I owe you an apology," he said, a paper plate loaded with potato salad and ribs shaking slightly in his hands. "When all this started, I thought you were just a troublemaker. Some guy who didn't understand how things worked here. But you saw what the rest of us ignored. Thanks for not backing down." I didn't need his apology. I didn't expect it either. But it meant something, to me and to him, I think. It meant the fear was gone. People finally saw that it was never about rules or decorum or pool chairs. It was about control, and someone had broken the spell. And the neighborhood? It blossomed. Events that would have been impossible before, because they didn't follow Pris's vision, became commonplace. Families hosted monthly potluck dinners where longtime residents and newcomers actually mingled. Kids played in the streets again, their laughter no longer silenced by noise complaints or stern warnings about unregistered skateboards. We held movie nights by the pool. The same pool that had once been Pris's kingdom now echoed with joy, not tension. Even the landscaping changed. A group of neighbors got together to start a community garden in the old disused dog run area. Under Prissy, it had been unauthorized landscaping. Now, rows of tomatoes, herbs, and sunflowers stood tall where dead grass once lay. Every weed pulled, every seed planted felt like a reclamation. A soft rebellion against years of micromanagement. And the pool chair, yes, the very one where this entire saga began, is still there. Same plastic mold, same shady spot under the oak tree. But now, when I sit in it, I don't glance around nervously wondering if someone's going to roll up in a pink golf cart and demand to know what gives me the right. I just lean back, crack open a book or chat with a neighbor, and enjoy the silence. The peace isn't in the quiet, it's in the absence of oppression. There's even a small sign on the emergency exit gate now. A simple metal plaque: emergency exits must remain clear at all times. Community safety rule number 1. Every time I pass it, I smile. It's subtle, but those who know, know. That sign didn't just remind us of fire codes, it reminded us that a golf cart parked in front of an exit gate once sparked a revolution. And perhaps the greatest twist of all? The park. You remember the green space Prissy tried to sell out from under us to build her community coffee shop, the one we later found out was going to be run by her niece? Well, we built something there after all. Not a cafe. Not condos. A single memorial bench. Clean, wooden slats, facing the sunrise. On it, a bronze plaque, in honor of those who stood up for what's right. It sits exactly where she wanted to pour concrete. And the irony? Prissy now picks up trash in that same park as part of her court-ordered community service. If you'd told me a year ago I'd see the self-declared queen of the HOA picking up gum wrappers and cigarette butts while children giggle on the swing set nearby, I wouldn't have believed you. But karma has a funny way of being both slow and precise. And sometimes, it lets you watch. As I sit here now, same chair, same sun, same water gently rippling nearby, I realize that this is what peace actually looks like. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of fear. Of tyranny. Of someone weaponizing rules to elevate themselves. The HOA didn't just get new leadership. The community got its soul back. You know what I learned through all this? Bullies don't thrive because they are strong. They thrive because people stay silent. Because it's easier to comply than to confront. But once someone speaks up, really speaks up, it gives others the courage to do the same. Prissy lasted 20 years not because she was clever or fearsome, but because no one had ever pushed back hard enough to make her stumble. When I stood up to her, I wasn't just doing it for myself. I was standing up for every neighbor she'd silenced, fined, embarrassed, or bullied into submission. And once that first domino fell, the rest followed fast. So here's what I'll leave you with: document everything. Truth is a quiet ally, but it's strong when you give it a voice. Speak up. Show up. Be persistent. Change doesn't always roar into town, it often starts with a single moment of defiance. And most importantly, remember that peace isn't passive. It's built. If you've read this far, thank you. Truly. If your HOA's ever pulled something crazy, share it. Let others know they're not alone. And if you're dealing with your own Prissy Peterson, remember, she only wins if you stay quiet. This is Nolan, signing off from QA Stories. The neighborhood's safe now, but trust me, there's always another tale just around the cul-de-sac. Stick around. We've got more receipts. The end.